Can you hear me now? Hello. You're good. Good evening. Let's get started. We don't have to do anything unique for the working session, so we will start with Amber and our special guest.
Ooh, that's gonna fall. Good evening. Today we have invited the Forest Service to join us to be able to discuss the naming criteria that they have, as many of our trails that have been planned and built are on their pieces of property. So we would like to discuss what those criteria are. We have questions that we've asked them regarding their criteria, and there's listed there in the packet 1 through 6. I won't read them all, but their responses to those questions are that the trails need to be associated with natural landscape or geographical feature. Also, the name cannot be specific to a user group. And finally, names associated with a person will not be considered. So if there are other questions of the council that you would like to ask, we can open it up for discussion. That's what we suggest. We also suggest that we get direction from council on how to move forward with proposing a list to the Forest Service. But I guess I'll turn the time over to you for questions or further discussion.
Any questions?
Mr. Mayor Pro Tem, Amber, could you remind us which trails in particular?
Yes.
We need to have the discussion and the direction? 304 and 305.
We've
Mule
got-
Park
I will
downhills
go
I know are
through.
2, but I know there were a few others.
Okay. I sent this list to the Forest Service. We've got Trail 201 Sunset, Trail 300 and 301 Mahogany Ridge, Trail 307 and 406 Peregrine, Trail 404 Maple Syrup, Trail 402 and 403 Hornet, Trail 405, we haven't come to names with the council yet, so we've got a couple that the committee put together, but we haven't presented it to the council yet because we wanted to be able to understand this naming criteria. But we do need to name 405. Trail 409, same thing. No name yet. Trail 501, King Green. That's over near Holbrook. 502, Encore. Sorry, 502B, Encore. And then Trail 304, 305. And Trail 30, let's see, I think that actually might be the last one. Yep, that's it. So we have 11.
So just so I was clear, so Maple Syrup, Hornet, and Mahogany Ridge are all names that don't meet the criteria, and so we need to be...
So we've been told that syrup would not be accepted, but maple could be accepted because it describes a land feature. And the Forest Service can speak to that too. Yeah. And explain, but if you want examples of what would be acceptable and not, we've got explanation for some of them.
So could I just clarify, of all the 10 trails that you just mentioned, is that right, 10?
11, well, 10. Yeah, you're right.
304, 305?
Well, 305 hiking trail is the 11th one.
Mm-hmm.
So it's actually 11.
And of those, only 405 and 409 had not been named up to this point, or preliminarily named?
We have all but 3 that we proposed a name to the Forest Service. Mm-hmm. Some which were acceptable and some which did not meet the criteria. So, for example, 307, 406 Peregrine was not accepted. So that's one we would have to look at creating, proposing a name for, the peregrine name. Maple syrup, so the syrup would not be acceptable for that one. They're good with Hornet. King Green was after a person, so we have to come up with a new name for that trail. Encore 502B doesn't meet the criteria as well. And then 304, 305, we asked for approval on Bell & Co., and that wasn't accepted either. So we have a few that we have to go through and come up with a new name for.
So I have a question about, like, peregrine. If we change the name to spell it like the hawk, is that okay? Yep. Okay, or falcon?
Yeah.
Peregrine falcon, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can speak to those a little bit. So I'm not the one that gets to decide the names. This had to go up through our public affairs officer, and this was her explanation for these trail names. So peregrine, the name, the spelling that is related to the name, her explanation was that in order to get something named after someone, it has to go through multiple, like, criteria. It has to go through multiple chains to be, like, approved of. So it has to go through our forest, then to the region, then to the Washington office. Like, there's multiple levels, and there's pretty strict criteria on it, and a lot of it is, it has to be federally or nationally significant. And so we don't think that peregrine would make it through that process, and it would also take a long time. And I just don't think that we have that amount of time to spend trying to get that through, because the trail is already open to the public, and I think it needs a name in order to just streamline the process and make sure that we've got a consistent message to the public. So,
Can I ask a question, just
yeah.
Peregrine in particular?
Mhm.
You know, the mountains behind us are the Sessions Mountains, named for Peregrine Sessions, who obviously this trail was intended to be named for. So even with that background and underlying that it's a trail in the Sessions Mountain named for one of Bountiful's founding fathers, you still think that timeline would just be too long?
Yeah, I do. She said that, you know, maybe if we had really thought this through and started, you know, years ago getting this process underway and understood what we were looking at, and like, I don't think any of us understood, you know, when this was first proposed, exactly what the parameters were. And so, you know, it might have been like, I don't know how long it took them to get the Sessions Mountains named. I don't know who was like, you know, maybe they adopted it. It may have been something that, you know, the folks that settled Bountiful started calling those mountains, and then the forest just adopted it when that happened. I don't know the history there or the timeline. So I couldn't tell you if it was the same process that we're looking at or not.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Sorry,
Yeah.
I was just going to ask, you bring up like timelines, and obviously many of these trails are open, they're being used, they're kind of already being adopted into maybe local lore.
Yeah.
And so is there a finite timeline? I mean, I think time is sort of the essence, because we want to have signage and mapping and where people can know where they are. But as far as the Forest Service is concerned, are there deadlines or timelines that we need to be, that we're looking at?
I don't think, we don't have a set deadline where we need the names by. I do think it is as soon as possible, as soon as we can get stuff through. I know that our public affairs folks are aware of what's going on. They want these pushed through quickly, and so I don't think it will take us, if we come up with a list that is, you know, meets all this criteria, I don't think it will take very long for them to get it through the process.
I'm just thinking about moving forward. Could we have a joint work session with the Trails Committee and the council and bring names?
I like that idea. I mean.
Probably looking at you, Kate, because you're on that.
Probably, it would be a council work session to which the Trails Committee would be invited. But I still think it would be better for them to come with recommendations rather than sitting and having a brainstorming session all together. So it might be moot to do that.
I believe in Amber, Brock, or Todd can chime in the April Trails Committee meeting, with this particular issue in mind, there was a brainstormed list of some backup names.
Yeah, we-
Peregrine with the spelling of the bird of prey
Yep.
was one that
Yep.
that was suggested to solve that one in a more quickly manner. And there were some brainstorms of a few others. One of our challenges, I think, that we may have is maple syrup, for instance, obviously suggested because there's a lot of maple trees in the area, beautiful maple trees. Calling a trail maple feels like just maple. Doesn't seem very like it would help anyone locate it. It's adding the syrup part was, an element of fun. So, and Mahogany Ridge, I would say the same. I would be curious as to why that one doesn't pass muster.
Yeah, so I can explain that, because that was a question I had also, especially because I think the syrup, because it does sort of indicate like a user group, it's like fun, playful. That was one of her, so her critiques were that those aren't maple syrup trees, right? Like they're not the type of tree that produces syrup that we would eat, so it's misleading in that way. And so she was not okay with it for that reason, but then also that we don't name trails around a user group, which I think is something that we're kind of experiencing putting in mountain bike trails. That's not something we normally do. And so there is a vibe to mountain biking trail names, and I think it's important to indicate, especially if it's like a downhill or something, that is not like a place you're gonna go hike to see maple trees, like if it's primarily a downhill trail. So that was one of the reasons why, which one is it? The Elephant Down. So she was okay with adding down to that, just because you're going to Elephant Rock or down from Elephant Rock. And I think that helps with the mountain biking and the directional, confusion that might come up with names. But the reason she wasn't okay with syrup was because those trees don't produce the syrup that it's just misleading to what's actually up there. And then she also mentioned that they've had people try to tap maple trees in the area and then come to us and say like it doesn't work, and we're like, you would need a permit for that anyway, so it's not good. But yeah, so that was the main reason for not putting that on the trail.
Okay, and what about Mahogany Ridge? I mean, there are some mahogany trees there. It is on a ridge, so that one kind of
Totally
baffled
okay.
me.
Yep.
That one is okay?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, so as long as it's describing the landscape or the geological features, one thing she mentioned is it has to be on the forest. So I think Temple Ridge was suggested, and because the temple is not on the forest, we couldn't use that one.
Okay.
Yeah.
Colleagues, maybe, so I don't want to get ahead of our staff. I know there has been some names that were brainstormed, and maybe they've been previewed with the Forest Service to cull them for appropriateness and not making syrup out of trees that don't make syrup. But perhaps the easiest way is just to ask the Trails Committee to just make as many names as possible that are serious and not too fun, but are descriptive. And then we have, for our work session, we have a longer list to work from.
That sounds great to me. Question, so it sounds like the Trails Committee is already kind of a little bit down this path.
They started
On the
to,
April
and then
session.
after vetting with the Forest Service a little more between staff and Forest Service, we're getting more of an understanding of their criteria than before. So either we could go back to the committee and come up with a list, or there could be another approach, whatever you guys suggest.
I'm wondering if maple leaf is out then,
That feels too Canadian, Matt.
right?
She actually suggested that.
Maple leaf?
Yeah, she was like, leaf, and I was like, well.
Maple, because it could be hockey and people would
Maple
take a stick
Grove?
up there.
Yeah.
Did you say, is Sunset okay or not? That's a good one, okay.
Our historical activities, things like, so for instance, I know one of the names that brainstormed was Cowboy. I think we had envisioned it
That was rejected.
rejected, so.
I think if you can, let's
This
see,
one.
which one was that?
This trail.
Oh, yeah. Oh, historical activities. So I'm thinking like,
Because it didn't.
you know, if you guys can submit something with an explanation for why it's historical, in my mind, I think it would probably have to be like a mining site or something. Like, I know there was that Burrow mine back there. Like, I think you could use that because that would like register in our historical stuff.
Does that one present a challenge since there is an entity or a group that
Oh,
has an idea for that trail and wants
Okay.
to make it a trail that,
right,
as I understand it,
right.
perhaps the Forest Service does not want to make a trail?
That I think you could use something to the effect of like, you know, that was a historical use back there. I think maybe, you know,
So something that was mining terms like pickaxe trail or,
maybe, yeah. And I can confirm that with her, but I do think historical stuff, as long as it's not like
Maybe,
crazy.
maybe a trail like Mayday for the plane that crashed up there.
I
Like
don't
what?
know. So there's a plane
Maybe.
crash that crashed in the Sessions Mountains and,
Oh,
So we could,
Mayday.
so Mayday.
you know,
or pull up, I don't know.
Never
I
mind.
came up with Holbrook Hills.
so I think it would have to be like, I know that mountain biking trails have this sort of playful nameage, but I do think like the forest is just not gonna, I think
Okay.
it would have to be like the name of the plane or like something more historical sounding than like,
Okay, I get it.
not that I think it's a
My
bad
brain's going on a
name.
bunch of other
It's
names.
gonna have to be like Cessna 224.
Yeah.
Mayday.
Also, I want to remind you, committee is not meeting in July, so if we're going to rush this along, we may want to reconsider having it go back to the committee, just
So-
because we're not meeting in July.
So those that are open, that need names, would be
Maple
Peregrine.
syrup,
Peregrine's, like, I just feel
Oh.
like, we'll just use their former names. It's like the artist formerly known as Prince. So the trail formerly known as Peregrine, like the founding father. Like, so that one would be a priority. 304, 305, formerly known as Bell and Co. would be a priority. Maple syrup would be a priority.
Encore.
it's not built yet, but we want to get ahead of the game. Encore, yeah.
Did you say Team Green? Was that one that?
King Green, but
King
that's
Green.
named after somebody.
Okay. So there's 6. Because Hornet was okay, right?
Hornet's okay.
Hornet's okay, and Mahogany Ridge is okay.
Okay.
Sorry, I'm just looking, I'm thinking, I'm seeing 8.
Yeah, there's the hiking trail,
Oh.
which isn't built yet, but we want a name for it before it, gets too far along again. Same with 405, 409.
So priorities that are built and open to the public, though, would be
Peregrine,
Peregrine, Maple Syrup,
yep,
304, 305, Bell and Co. That's
yeah.
all one really long name. And then close to being built would be Encore, the hiking only in Mueller Park, and the King Green Holbrook Access Trail.
Mr. Mayor Pro Tem,
Yes,
could I ask a question?
absolutely.
Amber and Todd and Brock, our Trails Committee has given us they've already provided 2 or 3 names for several of these trails, right, that we could bring immediately to the council. Could you remind us all which trails they already have, a handful of suggestions for?
Yeah, so let's start with the Peregrine. They came up with Peregrine, the bird, and Goshawk, which both are good. We were given like the okay for those 2. Maple syrup, we didn't foresee becoming an issue with syrup, so that one we don't have an alternate name for. For For the King Green Trail, we came up with Cowboy Up, Cowboy King, or Temple Ridge, all of which do not meet the criteria. Internally, Todd and I came up with some like random names just to see how they would fly. So I came up with Holbrook Hills, and that would be okay. And then the committee came up with Big Rock for the hiking trail, which is okay. Wiki Up was the other name, but that was not approved. We didn't come up with a 304, 305 because we were told that council would be coming up with a name for that one. So we didn't have, I suggested Elephant Down just to see if that would get approved, and that one would. So, with Encore, we didn't have alternates, but Todd and I came up with yellow because the trail has a lot of yellow wildflowers and what else? Yellow wheatgrass and soils, and he was up there flagging it like a week ago. So I asked him what he thought it should be called, and so we came up with that. But
So would it be possible between now and maybe the next council meeting on the 24th, where we don't have a work session, that we could maybe just survey the Trails Committee,
yeah,
have them make some recommendations to staff, and then have our famous trail staff bring 3 or 4 recommendations for each trail to the council to that meeting? Is that possible in the next,
yeah, we can do that. Yeah,
7 to 10 days?
yeah.
Okay.
I have a
That might
question.
facilitate it, if the council's comfortable with that approach.
I think it's a good approach with one caveat, and that's what I was going to ask our city manager if he has thoughts on. There's 2 trails that we had planned to name for residents that have contributed a lot to our community, and in particular our trail system. And in one instance, we did so in an open public meeting, in another we gave a letter to that person's family as well. So it seems that we have some sensitivities around 2 of those that we need to be thoughtful about, along with our Forest Service friends. And so if there are any thoughts on how in particular we handle those 2, given that those are just a little more, I think, tender and things we should be thoughtful about, given that those families still reside in our community.
Yeah, I've talked to the one family already, and they understand. That's the Bells. I've talked to the Bells and helped them understand, and they're okay with anything that the council comes up with. And Cammie sort of said, Jesse's probably telling us all I told you so anyway. So she's okay. I think with the Greens, it'll probably need to be a similar conversation, that we can just explain that we're trying to work with the Forest Service, and we may have gotten ahead of ourselves. We're working on a way to memorialize King in some other way. Now, we have the bridge, is that correct, that we've considered? And
There's
is
a
that
plaque on it too,
yeah,
that Brock put on it.
the King Green Bridge?
It's the King's Crossing.
King's Crossing,
Yeah.
that's right.
Yeah.
So, but that, unless you have other ideas, I think a personal touch is probably the way to go with them too. And so I think the question is, would you still like to have, just as a starting point, some recommendations for those 2 trails from the Trails Committee? Or would you like to come up with them whole cloth?
I would love recommendations from the Trails Committee. And if that can happen, I'm seeing like lots of nodding of the head that that's possible.
I think we
for
would
one,
just,
would love to hear those and get that input, because
If
they've
you-
been thinking about them.
so I'm sorry, I was just going to say, if you do want to do that, and then it'd be good to hear from the rest of you, then we can clarify with the Trails Committee that these are starting points. Don't get married to any of them. Trails Committee, right? So, anyway, what are your thoughts, everyone else?
Brock, did you have a comment?
Yeah, just as a reminder, maybe you're thinking about this already, we do have a trail named Bellevue. It's in the Holbrook area. So I don't know if that would help with the family, help them understand that.
Thanks.
I would be happy to have the brainstormed list. I would be interested in providing the Forest Service criteria to those two families and asking if they have any ideas to engage them in those two particular trails as an additional step.
Okay.
We can do that.
Anything else? Thank you for joining us tonight. All right, our next item, I will turn over to City Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem,
Thank you.
and members of the City Council. In your packet on page 7 is the staff report on the Get Healthy Utah Community application. I think you're all aware that this is a program sponsored by the Utah League of Cities and Towns in conjunction with the state to help our communities promote healthy lifestyles. And there's a designation that goes with this for the League of Cities and Towns. They recognize cities that achieve this designation at either the spring conference or fall convention. And if applications are due some period of time before that, but the mayor and Councilmember Price Hewish have been talking about heading up a process for getting Bountiful recognized and qualified. And included in the staff report are the steps for qualification. I think tonight, what we would like to have a quick conversation about is, one, I think there was a draft letter that was sent out. I don't know if you had feedback or not yet on that, but it might be good to see if there's any feedback on the gist of the application that'll be signed on behalf of the council. And then second, we need to put together a committee, and so I think the idea would be, one, is the council supportive of having the committee made up of organizations that sort of already exist or people that are already engaged in our community, so we're not kind of creating something out of whole cloth? And second, how many people do you think ought to be on the committee? I think some guidelines around, the number of folks, recognizing that the more people that are involved, there is a broader perspective, but it also tends to make things a little unwieldy. And so those are the questions for tonight, council. And with that, turn the time over back to you to see what kind of discussion you have.
Thank you. Open to questions or comments.
Mayor, if I may?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem. I like the idea of using existing people who are already doing these things. And I think we all already thought of several people who would be great working on this committee, and I feel like keeping it small is good. What is the minimum? Does it have a minimum committee? Four people.
Does that and that includes the city representative, or is that in addition to?
It just says 4. It
Okay.
doesn't say 4 plus city staff or elected official. Just says 4, but making sure that, like you had reflected in here in the report, that it's diverse. And so I thought, and one of the concerns is, what would the staff time be, once it's underway? And I thought, well, we know that the requirement is to meet 4 times a year and, establish the strategies and then make a plan. But, as Councilmember Child has said, and other people have said, a nice thing is we have really engaged communities and groups that already exist, and that could really, I think, segue into a committee here. I think maybe if we decide to move forward, somebody in healthcare would be wonderful, because it is a health-based initiative. Education, city, those are things that could be hammered out. We could decide that and see who we would want to invite. But I also agree at getting it started. It's something that you can redesignate every 3 years. You kind of make a 3-year plan. This is what our strategies are, how we hope to, even if you have something that's already in place, maybe over the course of 3 years, how do you intend to improve or reach more people, that kind of a thing. And I think it's something that could be revisited. Is this, in a year or 2, 3, is this the right size committee? Do we feel like there's a lack or a hole, or is it great how it's moving forward? So I think getting started, if there were, I think somewhere between 4 and 6. 4 is the minimum. And I think it could be something that, is doable. I think this is something that is doable at this point in time.
Okay.
Mayor Pro Tem,
Yes.
I forwarded to everyone an email that I unfortunately received really late at almost 5 o'clock today, just before this meeting, from the Office of Outdoor, or the Division of Outdoor Recreation. They saw that we had this item up for discussion and wanted to note that there is a Every Kid Outdoors program that can be a component to a Healthy Utah designation, and that some of the traditional focuses of the Healthy Utah designation are improved infrastructure. So infrastructure for biking or walking or wayfinding, other things like that. But this edition would allow for a focus on outdoor activities that are focused on youth. And so that I thought might be an interesting element, because it might allow us to engage our youth council. So if we're looking at groups that already exist, the youth council might be one of them. It just so happens that one of our residents is the director of the Office of Outdoor Recreation, so maybe that would also be someone that we could tap into. I like the comment about healthcare. We have Lakeview Hospital in our community. That might afford us some easy people to tap into as well. And then our farmers market community, and or some of our avid gardeners looking to establish that first community garden, seemed to me like a good group, along with maybe someone from Trails that could round out,
Right.
along with a council member or the mayor. Or
Another one I was thinking about was Communities That Care, because they do a lot of that mental health piece, and they're already also involved in our service committee. And speaking of the Bountiful City Youth Council, this is something that the Youth Council is very interested in doing some things this coming year that are inclusive of all kids in the community, that get kids outside and participating in things that just kind of build community and can enhance, that mental and physical health piece. So I love that coming from the Office of Outdoor Recreation, and that could be a really good overlay there.
There was a link I'd sent out too about that city being a city of trees. And I don't know if working towards something like that, incorporating it into this, would give us an ability to do two things and achieve, at one time, achieving two different designations.
I'm just going to say, in the materials provided by Healthy Utah Community, there is one under, the mental health component that is beautifying a section of your community that can help promote gathering. So, if that's something that potentially our tree program could even, I'm not sure exactly where, that our tree, I cannot remember exactly where our tree planting initiative is intended, but there's even potential for overlap there, and thinking, okay, we're going to be planting trees. That's something we want to, be adding to our greenscape and our tree canopy, and can that overlay with social gathering?
Yeah. Mayor Harris had provided me some questions to ask as well. So one is Councilwoman Price Hewish willing to lead the effort?
I am so willing.
Okay. The other is, do we feel we can pursue this course with limited resources and time required by staff? I think we talked about it a little bit. Start small and evaluate to go big.
Gary, is there someone from the staff, we'd probably need someone from staff to help attend meetings and do a little bit of coordination. Is there someone that you envision filling that role? And
Don't know who yet, but if this is a priority for the council, we'll find that person. I think a big answer to the question of how much time it will take, it depends upon whether or not we're going to try and promote existing programs or create new programs. And I think some of the conversations that I've heard around the table when we've watched other cities receive this award, I've heard members of the council say, well, we already do that. Well, you have this. So I think there are a lot of things that we are already doing as a community. And if we're willing to sort of limit our first try at highlighting those as opposed to coming up with programs, then the impact on staff should be pretty minimal.
I personally love that idea, and I think leveraging things that we already have, making strategic plans to continue those on, and I had another thought, but it's,
perhaps
So-
if we're drawing from existing groups, that helps us highlight the things we're already doing that we've all mentioned when we've sat through these presentations. So to me, that would say, like, you know, if we want to focus on the outdoor activities we're already doing, maybe we're asking someone from the Trails Committee to take on an additional, you know, kind of limited assignment to do this, or someone from the rec district staff, or maybe one of our key volunteers from the farmers market or the gardeners and BCYC, because they're all already doing great things. And maybe if they were connected or highlighted, then we more than meet the criteria, or it gives those things even more energy than they're already generating on their own.
So work on hitting the designation with everything we have first, and then get that established, and then maybe year 2, year 3, we look at where do we want to expand and grow. Because then you could go almost 2 years with maybe not even really adding anything more, because we're just highlighting the stuff we've already been doing, and that gives us the designation to build on. And then year 3 or year 4, we start adding new things.
I think we each have different committee assignments,
Yeah.
and sometimes when I listen to one of you talk about your assignments, and I'm like, I didn't know we were doing that.
Yeah.
I didn't know the youth council was doing that particular activity. That's really cool. Or, so to me, we've got things happening in silos, and they could be better connected, and then more people would know and be able to take advantage of them, or is an easy first step.
Okay.
So what sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, I think, like, the idea about becoming a tree city, I love it. But I think it would be great if we could establish this structure first with the existing people. And I just had a thought about farmers market. If we could possibly combine the staff, the city staff who's already doing the farmers market. I mean, I don't even know if that's a possibility, but that would also be less overlap, maybe? Or no, that's not what I'm saying. It would be good overlap, so someone's not having to do extra work. I don't know, just a thought.
So what I'm hearing, though, is probably a committee of 4 to 5 people, in addition to the city representatives, staff, and council, and that we're going to pull from organizations that have programs that we think we could highlight in the application. So may I make a suggestion? And that would, I know that some informal lists have kind of been going around. Would the council be willing to just email me the names of people and/or organizations and copy Cecily, make sure that the two of us are on it, and we can start to pare down the list and then work with the mayor about finding some appointments. Does that sound reasonable to everybody?
Okay.
Okay, great.
Any other questions? Awesome. Then we'll move forward with the direction of the council, and we will, if there's nothing else to bring up, then,
I have a question.
okay.
Okay, so there are these steps and they need to go in order. So I would like to say, I think we are still within the window right now of moving this forward for the August deadline. The letter of commitment is really low-hanging fruit if we've all decided that's what we want to do. Establishing this smaller kind of coalition of stakeholders and then having a meeting with them where they come knowing that, the strategies are going to be discussed and, getting them up to speed before the meeting. So I'm just wanting to kind of talk about timelines, about if we're doing this, let's move it forward to that August deadline with the intention of like, okay, we're going to get those names in the next week. We can then make invitations, we can send the letter, and then we can, really try and move this to that deadline. How
So
does-
is our first step the letter? I thought your draft was great. I don't have any changes. To the extent that you need, if the mayor's signature is enough, great, but if you need council signatures, I thought your draft was great. I'd be happy to sign.
So then if you get the letter, if we get that done and assigned by whoever needs to, then are you wanting to say that by maybe our next council meeting, we have names of individuals provided?
I would love to get names before that so we could then try and make invitations sooner than later, because that's, our next council meeting is 2 weeks away.
Yep.
And then I would love to be able to kind of make invitations and set a day for a meeting sooner than that, if possible.
Okay.
Pardon me. So if we could have names, any suggestions that you have, maybe a week from today, by the 17th, and we can make invitations by the end of the
Month.
by the end of the week.
Yeah.
Actually, we could get invitations out, and that will allow us to get all of the names ready by the 26th or so. And then we'll have a good month and a week to put the pieces together. And we can get the letter out this week if the council's comfortable having the mayor sign it. Well,
Okay.
when she
Because then
comes
that
back.
gives you the month of July to have as many meetings as you think you need with that committee to be locked and ready by the end of the month of July to get it in August. Okay? So a week from today, have names. Okay, awesome. Then we will close this meeting for now and have a brief break before we start city council at 7 o'clock.
Thank you.